Thales of Miletus, considered by most to be the first scientist in the history of the West, once attributed souls to all things within the world, and the genius Plato once thought ideas themselves could be gods. Most, of course, know a common phenomena in pre-Christian religion to have posited the cosmos as agents, members, and parts as divine and mythologicalized, beings that were in themselves holy substances and thus beyond reasonable inquiry. It was this pan-continental and multicultural belief in the primitive religions of the world that Christianity would utterly smash, and as a result, leave the former followers of this theological universe to be wholly flabbergasted and disillusioned, leaving many with the ever-creeping desire to re-mythologicalize the world around them. First, one must understand the pagan mindset and the ancient people's mesmerization of the cosmos and its world. The religious schools and cults of Egypt and Mesopotamia had explained natural phenomena with direct spiritual and godly coefficients, which added undeniable materialistic implications in their understandings of the world. In the era epic, Marduk leaves his dwelling place in the cosmos, thus inaugurating a cosmological unease, which physically shook both the world and the heavens, and only upon reclaiming his previous position did the cosmos finally come back to stabilization. Later on, Marduk unleashes an arrow to the sky, the result of this leading to the creation of the rainbow. Juxtapose this incident to the Hebrew Bible, whereas God, by his will, creates the rainbow without any further extension to aid him. In Egypt, the demons manifest themselves in the body of a man, leading the priests in an attempt to aid him to conduct spells and incantations to expel the unwanted guest from the body. Hindus in the Orient, like the former, at times, describe the cosmos as being within the womb of a giant deity who possessed bisexual powers. And in the stories of Zeus and his war against the Titans, who he strikes down with celestial fire, resulting in the creation of mankind. However, since the Titans ate the flesh of Dionysius and were themselves evil, mankind inherently was made bad, having elements of order and chaos embedded in his code of creation. In the Neoplatonic scheme of man's fall, he was, like Adam and Eve, gifted with supernatural powers and the goodness of the gods, which was cut short with a cosmological falling out, and thus mankind, once mighty and powerful, was reduced to the pitiful walking corpse he is today. The seemingly trivial examples of pre-Christian myth aid in understanding the view of the polytheistic religion. One and foremost, that God, nature, the elements, luminaries, and cosmos was divine and sacred. They were themselves either God, God's home, or God's substance and dwelling place. This is precisely what the Pauline Revolution overthrew, a world where natural phenomena was directly imbued within the power and the domains of the supernatural, thus creating a world with human elements, said elements that cannot be understood with human eyes, and exalt themselves to be glorified as God's spirit. The first naturalist in Greece, Anaximander, was the first to explain naturalistically that the tides were not due to Poseidon, which was a common held belief amongst the Hellenes. Even then, like usual, the Greeks show a more unreasonable side to their philosophy, as even Anaximander believed that the luminaries were gods, and the cosmos was set up by a divine lawmaker. The great giant of antiquity, Aristotle, believed in the divinity of the world, a world understood to be God, eternal, and uncreated. The firmament and the luminaries covering the sky were understood by him to be intelligent and sentient beings. Indeed, from Plato to Plotinus, the ruling consensus of Western philosophy for 800 years had a simple underlier, that the universe was divine in itself. These ideas, conjured by pagan speculative systems, would find themselves under massive attack by the new Christian faith in the centuries after Plotinus. Christianity's conception of the world was radically different to all major and minor pagan cults and speculation. A summary of the polytheistic, cosmological, ethical, and theogonic systems before Christianity can be addressed. 1. That due to the anthropomorphic and humanized elements of the gods, evil and suffering was their direct result. Thus, no Greek, no matter how unreasonable, was able to study or even comprehend a god like Yahweh that can be trusted without question, a god unlike Zeus, Athena, Marduk, and Ashur that can't be killed, tricked, or even bribed. Thus, pagan ethics and ontology centered itself as more detached from the world in an attempt to flee back to the spiritual realm, creating a world filled with hostility and ruthlessness. Since gods were immanentized and subject to the same law of nature, the cosmos itself as being was exalted to a godlike status, or praised for having holy attributes. The Christian theological and moral status of both God and the universe was remarkably different. Yahweh is a supreme and personal God. However, unlike pre-Christian religion, Yahweh was beyond time, space, and matter. He is a God of transcendence, incapable of being a victim of evil or a distributor of it. This worldview entails that only creatures of God can commit evil, and more specifically, that one, and the only one, made in his image, mankind. Since humans alone could commit evil on earth, he has free will, as only Yahweh, as previously mentioned, is devoid of all sin and chaos. Man is isolated as a miserable and internally oppressed being, but since none of the world or the cosmos or any creation as we know it is inherently evil, since Yahweh cannot commit such wickedness, the world is subject to change. As now, man, having control and free will, is able to progress and improve on his situation, creating a positive and subjective view of reality. Now, since God is beyond his creations, they are devoid of any and all divine status. The cosmos, nature, and the world is now open to natural study and reasonable deductions. Such a dehumanized conception of reality left the heavens, stars, and the universe open to man's science, a tradition seemingly completed by the modern science of Galileo, Copernicus, and Newton. In its infancy in the Western world, the Christian Church ruthlessly attacked the backbone of pagan cosmological speculation, that being the cosmos was divine. Basil of Caesarea, the Cappadocian father, attacks Aristotle's cosmos, stating, "The heavens are not alive, nor is the firmament understood to be a sentient thing." Another Eastern father, John of Damascus, joins Basil, stating, "Let no one think that the skies and heavens are alive, for they are inanimate and they lack sense." Now, even going back to the Bible itself, it denies in a Hebraic conception of creation that the divine essence that other cultures, say the Mesopotamians and the Minoans, applied to the world around them. Furthermore, the Roman Greco concept of God was interlinked directly to nature. In pre-Christian religion, God or the gods were so interwoven in the structural reality and nature, they ultimately became one and the same. The Stoics, deeply inspired by the rhetoric of Aristotle, taught that God's providence and reason was itself inseparable from matter and the cosmos, leading the great Stoic Seneca to state that what is nature but God and the divine reason inserted in the whole universe in its parts? Or in another Stoic, such as the famed Marcus Aurelius, proclaiming nature to be the oldest of gods. With the establishment of this theistic dialectic, one of immanence and transcendence, one can paint a view of the scientific understandings of the Hebraic Christian and the Roman Greco-pagan concepts of the nature of theology. The latter, being Greek, identifies God and the objects around the world as in the same dimensions, God, or the gods, actively participating in the cosmos and placing natural phenomena in place like a chess game. However, completely unlike Yahweh, the gods are not all-powerful, omnipresent, omnipotent, or omniscient. They are usually depicted as limited, and if anything, forces of nature. Remember, the Stoics who praise Zeus for being a great organizer, but not praised like Yahweh, who is the creator of all things. Ultimately, the rather unimportant role of the gods of the pagans and their pantheistic nature allowed practically all cults and polytheistic religion to worship and sanctify elements and attributes of the world around them. Such deifying of the world to such a scale has no place for scientific inquiry. A deducible and rational understanding of the cosmos becomes an empty category, as ultimately it is due to this theological view held up by all polytheistic beliefs before the Christian era that throws a wrench in mathematical and scientific achievements of their respective cultures. As even though the Sumerians, Greeks, Babylonians, Chinese, and Hindus made enormous contributions in philosophy, technology, the arts, and astronomy, not a single one of them were able to create a true science. On the other end of the spectrum, Christians were left in a state of perplexity and discovery, as all things physical were all creations of God. Not a single one of them can claim divine adherence. All were open to human eyes. In addition to this, God, unlike the Stoic, Platonic, Hindu, and Gnostic beliefs, created everything good. Nothing in the eyes of God was bad, rotten, or inherently evil, as suggested by the Hindu concept of creation. Zeus's formation of man from the Titans, nothing in the eyes of God was bad, rotten, or inherently evil, as suggested in the Hindu concept of creation. Zeus's formation of man from the Titans, or Marduk's using of Tiamat's body as the world's foundation. However, this is not to say that the Christian West, how seemingly rational I've depicted it, immediately desired to engage in science that led to the marvels and technology created in the modern periods. Indeed, even though Christianity denied the godhood of the cosmos, it still adopted a Christianized Aristotelian view of the universe. Thus, for most of the Middle Ages, this synthesis of Aristotle's cosmos and the Christian principle of creation stalled the insane technological and scientific discoveries made in the modern period. I merely advocate that Christian doctrine and the Bible opens up the possibility of the world to science and gives men decisive and new revolutionary outlooks into the world around him. Indeed, throughout the Protestant Reformation, the Renaissance of the 12th century, this rationalist element that remains dormant in Christianity was pried open, allowing a new advanced strain of personalism to be rethought of in the Lutheran and Calvinistic theology, directly inspiring Galileo, Bacon, Newton, and Kepler to march forward and bring a new philosophy of science, one where the dominant hierarchy of Catholicism was seemingly ignored, a science riled by nominalism that invoked total rationalism in natural and astronomic studies. Here we briefly look at the modern dilemma. Has a Christian rationalist overdose, dormant in its identity, only recently resurrected, turned men away from the very religion and ideology it was founded upon? I believe I could answer affirmatively to this question, that the immense amount of nihilism and the lack of commitment found in the modern world is very much a product of Christian unbalancement falling too much on reason. There is a positive result from this Christian crisis. One, and most importantly, being the undeniable technological, philosophical, scientific, and moral progress made since the 15th century. Indeed, in the past 5 centuries, ideals such as globalism, liberalism, the modern nation-state, and capitalism has produced a plethora of ethical ideals which ultimately lead to human progress in human physical life, being uplifted extraordinary heights. The scientific marvels that the modern world could boast of, such as the Copernican heliocentric model, the laws of Newton, and the modern physical and astronomical gains, had deeply aided in our ability to gain a wider and more comprehensive view of our world. On a technological level, people are able to live extraordinarily superior to the lives of our ancestors on a geometric rate. It is undeniable that the West's material wealth, being so much greater than any other civilization in history, is caused by the forces of the free market and industrial revolution. However, there is a dark side, the Christian demythologicalizing element, which is unique only to Christianity in the modern sense, allows the human appetite to be so disillusioned that ultimately the followers of Christianity will be forced to reinterpret other mythical and cultic theogonies in order to compensate for the lack of theological speculation that the Christian religion inoculates. Indeed, the effects are disastrous, as the cornerstone foundational piece of the West and the aforementioned modern scientific and philosophical developments made in the past 3 centuries are, on a Christian sense, found to be repulsive by its inhabitants. This rejection of tradition and religious ideology, which themselves founded our civilization, would lead ultimately to moral collapse, as societies become more and more mesmerized by destructive philosophies such as nihilism, objectivism, and philosophical materialism. This is not to say that the Christian tradition could wholly be rejected, as even though the glorious Renaissance and the systematic reappearance of pagan idolism in the past 7 centuries, the West substantially has remained firmly Christian, even when pushed to the breaking point, since tradition and philosophy of a certain civilization will always remain its definitive identity. All other alien idols are subsumed to the mainstream tradition. Since, as we know, tradition may be rejected, but unconsciously it remains alive in the society's mind. Thus, Christian philosophy has held such a powerful sway over the West's inhabitants, it becomes inseparable to the civilization's knowing faculties. It is a crucial and decisive, and if anything, the only way for the establishment of society's customs, living patterns, social law, philosophy, arts, economic speculation, political theories, and ethical discussions. Indeed, the descendants of Christian civilization, including myself, give much gratitude to the ideological and moral assessment that only can be addressed and developed in a Christian scheme of tradition.